Is this working? Can people hear me? Okay, excellent. So hello, thank you for still being in the room. I was expecting sort of a mass emigration followed by re-immigration as soon as I started talking. So as the next person started talking, I apologize. So that hasn't happened, so that's great news. So I'm going to be talking about two experiments on network nudges. I should say, by way of apology, the name network nudges was come up with by my colleague Michael Norton at Harvard Business School, who's a professor of marketing and so likes things with cool names. And it's sort of just stuck. I am an economist, and so I don't like things with cool names, but never mind. You will learn over the course of the next 25 minutes just how uncool I am, but never mind. So we've got this huge body of work showing that so people are socially influenced in their charitable giving. I don't think I need to belabor that point after the previous speaker, and also just your general common sense about the world. But there are, if you wanted 50 studies showing that people are socially influenced into making donation decisions, those 50 studies and more do already exist. So in general, when we're doing experimental interventions, we're looking at sort of direct intervention, which is to say, I am a charity, or in my case, I'm an experimenter working with a charity, and I write to these people and I ask them to make a donation. I sometimes include social information. So I say 9 out of 10 people have already given, or I can say the average gift is $2. People like you donate $10 on average, things like that. Or I can say, I can use the seed money effect described in a previous talk, saying we've already raised 60% of the money we need to raise. I'm telling you information about the social world, but I'm not actually intervening on you through it. It's quite rare to see people influencing others directly, which I feel slightly stupid saying after the previous talk, in which that's exactly what they did, but never mind. And also, Jonathan Mears' paper is very similar. But you see, essentially, people, instead of the charity saying please donate, you see people asking you to people to donate. So that's sort of where we start on this. So what I am talking about here is indirect social influence, which is to say, instead of me saying please donate, I'm saying to somebody else, please influence your friends. So we hypothesize that some people have better relationships with charities than others do. So if you can substitute the word charities for almost anything else, some people have better relationships with some people than other people do. That seems, again, fairly standard and not terribly insightful, which again is a theme of this talk. And so essentially agents can influence each other. So what we're going to try and do is get them to do that. But this influence theoretically should decline over connection. So if I ask Freddie to ask Rob, those people at the back over there, to make a donation, that might work fairly well. However, if I ask Freddie to ask Rob to ask Sarah to make a donation, that might work considerably less well. There's a limit to how far I can push this out. Unless I'm ALS, in which case it just goes forever and a day, but that's a whole other thing. So whether or not it's worth trying this, rather than just giving people social information, and how many degrees it's worth separating from the charity, the person you're asking to actually make the donation, will depend on the strength of the signal and the relationship between these players. So this is a diagram that my colleague Alex Tupper produced for me in PowerPoint. I have no idea how he did it, because I am about as technically incapable as any other 27-year-old, which is to say I'm the nadir of 27-year-olds when it comes to technical capability. Is very sad. That and the premature aging. Anyway, so we have... If we imagine we have a world where I, the charity, am over here, and I want to influence all of these people over here, people who I have an orange connection with, I have a strong link with. So if I ask this person's sort of a warm list donor, the kind of person who, if I ask them, I'm pretty confident they're going to say, yeah, sure, I'll donate. The blue people are the cold list people. It's actually handy that those colors are associated with those feelings. It's actually part of the behavioral insights team branding that it's those colors. The people who are blue, I don't have such a strong relationship with, so there's some probability they're going to donate, but the likelihood is I can't get all of them to do it. If, however, I restructure this network, I have a strong connection with this guy in the middle, and he has a strong connection with the other people around the outside. So if I ask him to ask them to donate, then for given parameter values, I might expect to elicit more donations than if I'd asked them all directly. That's the hypothesis. And probably my paper wouldn't have been accepted to this conference if my conclusion was, and that doesn't happen. So, I'm going to describe two experiments. The first one is an experiment which we carry out in an investment bank. Investment banks are full of people just like you and me. Very standard population, not like lab experiments where people are sort of a very particular subsample. Investment bankers, despite being about 95% male and about 95% under 40 and 100% rich, are just like you and me. That's my central hypothesis here, so bear with me. So whilst they do have some disadvantages in terms of generalizability, they have some advantages. One is they have an incredibly casual relationship with money, as you may have seen if you watched the financial markets in 2008-9. The other thing is they're siloed, which is to say, but thanks to the financial crisis, it's very difficult for them to talk to each other between their business units. If you're working in a team, in an investment bank, it's very difficult to move between teams on a given day in order to prevent you from engaging in such wonderful activities as insider trading and destroying the world economy. So that's great. There's also quite a hierarchical organization. Most employers are less hierarchical, but here you have a clear, this is the guy at the top, this is the guy at the bottom kind of relationship, which allows us to see how influence is spread out across the organization. So this is part of an annual fundraising campaign in which we ask people to donate a day's salary. If you ask for a day of my salary, you get about $15, I would guess, thereabouts, I don't know. If you ask an investment banker for a day of their salary, it works out at £600, which at today's conversion rate is roughly $1,000. So these guys it's worth asking them to give, compared to asking, say, me to give. If I was a business school professor, maybe not, but no mind. Anyway, so these guys are pretty wealthy, and we're asking them to give us some money, and all the money which they donate, we match, and then we split it between two charities, the Helen Bamber Foundation, which is a human rights charity, and Elephant Family, which is a charity that supports elephants. I didn't choose these charities were chosen, I have to say, by the bankers themselves. So what we've learned is investment bankers care about human rights, great, and elephants, slightly less expected. So that's basically the construct of our campaign. People can donate either by clicking a link in an email, or they can swipe their card on a number of machines we dot around the office, or they can go to a website and type in their email address. So you've pretty much removed all of the frictions between investment bankers parting with their money, which historically has worked out to be a good strategy for coke dealers. Anyway, so we're an investment bank, and what we do is we go and we identify some generous people within these investment banks. I'm aware this is being broadcast. It may not seem like that from the way I talk, but I am slightly aware. Anyway, so identify generous people in these bankers. Some of them are very nice people. Many of them are very nice people. Some of my best friends are bankers. And these guys who we identify are investment bankers who have given either more than 5 days' salary to charity through the firm in the past year, or they've volunteered for 5 days through the firm for the past year. They've taken advantage of the firm's employee volunteering program, or they've given as part of the one-day campaign, which is the campaign that we're talking about, in the previous 5 years. So these are guys who are consistent givers through the firm. And what we do is we're going to call these guys ambassadors. We're not going to tell them we're calling them ambassadors. We're going to call them that because that's a nice thing for me to be able to call them in the paper, rather than just the guys on whom we intervene, which has less of a nice ring to it. What we're going to do is we're going to randomly write to a bunch of these people, and we're either going to put them in a control condition, in which we don't write to them at all, a thanks condition, in which we say, thanks, you're a great person. This is what we say. This is what an email looks like, in case any of you are even less adept at technology than me. We just say, thanks. Last year you gave tons of money. You're a brilliant person. Thanks very much. In this reach out condition, we say, thanks, you're a great person. Please reach out and email your friends and colleagues in your team and get them to donate as well. And we have this final condition in which we emphasize the impact their donation can have, because $1,000 here and there, sooner or later it starts to add up to real money. So that's the third condition. So yeah, what we're basically interested in is the effect of intervening on one person on their network. In this case, because we've specifically primed a particular network, which is their team, and we know that they can't move between teams, what we're saying is if you're in the team with the person who I'm intervening on, you're the person we're looking at. We're treating you as though you were treated, even though many of you might not have been. Yes, that's what we do. We have 158 teams in the bank, and we have 66 business units, of which 28 contain ambassadors. So we're looking at people in these teams. So what do we find? In the control condition, about 5-6% of our participants make a gift. This isn't our ambassadors, all of our ambassadors give. This is 5 or 6% of people who aren't ambassadors in their teams give, which is not a huge proportion, but we're pretty pleased with it anyway, and the bank's pleased with it because it's not a small amount of money. If we say thanks, then there's some sort of effect of giving thanks, but it's not statistically significant at conventional levels, or indeed at unconventional levels. Only if you start taking P of 0.45 as being like the burden of proof do you start actually believing this finding. If we say the reach out thing, I may have sort of not buried the lead here. Okay, because we've got this. So basically, the reach out condition is phenomenally successful, and the impact condition is phenomenally successful. So we're really pleased with that. So we managed to go from not very many people donating to almost 40% of people donating with just so hooray, that's great. At the moment, however, it is quite a black box. I'm not really sure what's going on there, and we're unclear about how it is we're actually what's actually working and on whom this is working. So what's the channel? So let's have a look at people in the bank. As I said, the bank is very hierarchical. What you have down at the bottom left-hand side is analysts. These are basically the lowest of the lows, people with my skill set in an investment bank, which is to say they can just about operate Stata vaguely. And you have people on the far right-hand side who are managing directors. These guys are donating. When they donate, we receive about an extra $3,000 for each one of these guys we can elicit a donation from. So they're really worth getting. What we find is so our ambassadors are all in the middle here, because they're middle management. Our treatments are really effective on these guys down at the bottom, but these guys at the bottom are a really strange bunch. And they're really effective at these guys up here at the top, which suggests there might be some sort of guilt aversion going on. That's sort of where we are. We also can see, the spread of donations over time throughout the day, which we're try and use to get at the channel for which this is working. And so what we see is the average timing is slightly later in the treatment groups that work, and the spread of those donations is wider, which suggests it's not a case of the vice president, this ambassador, seeing his email and going, okay, I've got this up, standing up and saying, okay, guys, everyone donate. It seems like it's rippling out, which suggests what he does is he turns to the person next to him and says, hey, please make a donation. And then they do that, and so on and so forth, or something like that. I don't really have a strong hypothesis there. But this data is very, very noisy, so I'm not at all nailing my colors to the mast on that one. So we have this great experiment, well, mediocre experiment, interesting finding, I hope. It's all up to you guys to believe, I guess. But we're slightly concerned about the magnitude of the effect sizes. This is so good that I don't really believe it. And so I spent quite a lot of time trying to get rid of this thing. So we controlled for the previous giving in that business unit to make sure we hadn't accidentally selected really givey business units. And that doesn't do very much to the results. We exclude the smaller clusters, which could be buying the result. Still there, we exclude the analysts, who, as I said, are a really weird group. And it's basically everything seems to persist. So unfortunately, I can't tell you I was wrong. Or I haven't found out how I was wrong. Answers on a postcard. Anyway. So this is still worth further investigation. So we proceed at rapid pace to experiment number 2. We conducted an experiment with the Alzheimer's Society, which is a charity which supports people with Alzheimer's. And they're coordinating a government program called Dementia Friends. And the background of this is the Prime Minister, David Cameron, nice guy, has promised to create 1 million Dementia Friends before the next election. The next election, for those of you who don't follow British politics, is in about 6 months. About 8 months, sorry. And the results so far have not been stellar. The nicest thing you can say about this program is it is not the least successful government program of all time. That honor is reserved for a program called the Green Deal, which we spent about £50 million on and managed to elicit 4 responses in the first year of the program. That's unsuccessful. I don't need a randomized controlled trial to tell me that's unsuccessful. So yeah. So we've successfully recruited 10,000 dementia champions. These are guys who are supposed to go out and spread the word about being a dementia friend and do training for people. That's a good number. That's the number we were hoping for. We've been less successful at recruiting dementia friends through these dementia champions. We've only got about 70,000. So the average champions produce 7 friends. You can do the math and work out that we were expecting them to produce 100, so we're a little bit behind target. So what we want to do is make this figure better. That's the kind of thing that basically my job consists of people in government coming along and saying, we've got this thing, it doesn't really work. Would you mind taking a look? So we have 821 new dementia champions. We're interested in how many sessions they run, whether or not people go to any sessions at all, whether they train anybody in these sessions, and their ambition, which is to say, if they book a room for 150 people, I'm saying they're more ambitious than if they book a room for 10 people. So let's take a look at that. We've got 2 classes of treatment, these network nudges, and some more messages from previous dementia champions. We have this email which goes out from the Dementia Friends charity saying, please do this. First degree network nudge, we say, please invite your friends and family. Second degree, we say, please invite your friends to bring along their friends. So that's that. We also have these 2 messages where we prime them either with an emotion. So we say, this is a message from a previous dementia champion saying, I really enjoyed running my session. It was great fun. What a laugh. Talking about Alzheimer's all day. And we have a practical prime which we say, my session went really well, and I got people to come by basically using social media, in case people don't know. So those are our outcome measures again. What we find is we have a significant effect with our first degree network nudge on the number of attendees conditional people attending. We have no effect at all in any of our conditions on the ambition of people. And that's basically everything except to say that the emotive prime seems to be more effective at getting people to run sessions, which is if I say it was really fun to run a session, people seem to overcome their jitters about organizing a session, which seems fairly mechanical to me. So we've got a partial replication, which I'm very pleased with. The second degree network nudges, which I didn't really dwell on at all in this graph here, are pretty precisely estimated zeros. These are having no effect at all. So if I tell you, please ask your friends, you pretty much go out and do that, at least some of the time. If I say, please go ask your friends to ask your friends, you say, what the hell are you talking about? No way. Certainly in this context. That doesn't seem to be terribly effective. So there's that. Testimonials do not significantly do very much. Blah, blah, blah. Not very interesting. Basically, practical messages seem to drive the number of sessions the number of attendees to sessions. So if you run a session, and you have and you're given a practical tip, you're better at getting people to come to it. If I give you an emotional message saying the sessions are fun, then you're much more likely to run a session, which is good. So what we've done is we've reduced some pro-social behaviors using field experiments, which is sort of, I guess, the whole theme of the day. We find that third-party participants are motivated by inducement by a second party, which is a very long way of saying this seems to have worked. And the second-degree network nudges don't seem to work, and the network nudges periods seem to work on people who are of higher status, at least in the first experiment, which I sort of think is maybe guilt aversion. We need to do more stuff. So this is working fairly well. And I think this is fairly interesting. We need to run more studies. At the moment, I still don't believe any of my own findings. We've got another 3 experiments we're putting into the field to investigate this a little bit further. If anybody has any suggestions of context in which we may be able to test this out, or reasons why I might be wrong about all of my findings so far, I'm very, very happy to hear them. Nothing makes me happier than hearing how wrong I am. Okay, and I think that's everything.
Thank you, Michael. I'm sure I'm not the first one to say that, if you ever are looking for a second career as a comedian, I think that might work.
It's amazing to me how often people suggest I might be looking for a second career.
I was waiting for something like that. Okay, any questions? We do have time.
Could we possibly go back to the emails that you sent out and just kind of, I don't know if that's too much going back, but
Which study?
the first one with the 4 emails you sent out to the investment bankers. And then you said the last one was the most effective, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The fourth one and the third one are not significantly different from each other.
Okay.
But the point estimate in the fourth one is higher.
I just wanted to go back and see kind of what you said there.
There you go. So this is the fourth email. The bit that's in bold, if you can see that if you have high enough resolution on your eyes to tell whether it is in bold. This section here is the bit that differs from the third condition. So the active bit is please reach out to your friends and colleagues in your team and let them know about the huge contribution the donation can make. All they have to do is click this link, blah, blah, blah.
And then how was that different, sorry, from the first 2?
So the first one is please reach out to your friends and colleagues in your team. So here we add, and let them know about the huge contribution your donation can make. And the first one we say all you have to do is click this link.
Okay.
So all of the active ingredient is in the last paragraph.
Okay.
So I have a question. The second experiment.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think the results are tied to the charity being, or it being tied to the issue of dementia, as opposed to, would you get the same results if you'd pick something else?
I'm going to go on the sort of fullback for today and say I don't know. I'd love to run that experiment. So I think people in the UK, many of them will have people in their network who know, or at least, so I think the number of people who know someone with dementia is quite high. The number of people who know somebody with dementia is likely to be very nearly 100%. So I suspect in that sense, the likelihood of by reaching out just to your next stage in your network, the likelihood of finding supporters of that charity, people who have an empathy for it, is very high compared to lifeboats, maybe. So I suspect maybe I've found the charity for which it's most likely. However, I would be reluctant to speculate any more than I already have just then when I was speculating.
Any other questions? Oh, there's one back there.
Is there a reason why you put the ask in the last sentence? Typically, as fundraisers, we say, I'm writing to ask you to help out with XYZ, and here's why. This seems lost to me, and what's the experimental role of that?
So the reason we put it in the last sentence was, so we've already sent, everybody in the company has already received an email telling them about the campaign, in which they are asked up front to make a donation. We wanted to separate that out from this, and so, yeah, and then the bank wrote just make sure I haven't got the name of the bank in my slides. The bank wrote this and then said, oh, by the way, do you want to add something to it? And so, somewhat stupidly, maybe I said, okay, adding means putting on at the end. Maybe it would have been better or worse if I put it on the front, I don't know. I love your tie, by the way.
Looks like we're done. Okay, great. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.